I'm Alex Honnold, and while I'm usually outside rock climbing, I'm also the host of a new podcast from Rolex and the Washington Post creative group called Planet Visionaries. On the 4th episode, out now, I speak with Kirsten Forsberg about protecting an incredible marine creature, the giant manta ray. Check it out.
Ignition sequence has started. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
You have entered Untold Radio AM. And now broadcasting from a secret location, your hosts, Joel Sturgis and Doug Hychak. Damn, okay, we are here and you're listening to Untold Radio AM. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me is Mr. Doug Hychak. And high strangeness is afoot. That was awfully strange story you told me, but anyhow.
No, I didn't tell you the strange one.
No, you didn't yet. Okay, now just to catch everyone up.
No.
He was telling me about a past thing that happened.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you could really talk about it now or feel comfortable talking about that, but okay, then we won't. It's just crazy people.
But I'll move into something that happened the same day, which is coincidental, maybe?
Sure, it could be.
Or maybe not.
Is there such thing as coincidence, Doug?
I think there is, but I think when they're so incredibly related, probably not.
Okay.
You know.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Well, we got a great show on tap. Before you say anything,
I ain't saying nothing.
We got to talk about our guest.
Yes.
We got to have him. We're going to do this. Carl Jiménez is going to be on, and he's an anthropologist. And I said it without stumbling.
You did.
Who studies the Sasquatch mysteries.
But remember,
you're going to want to hang around to the bottom of the hour.
Keyword, anthropologist.
Right, anthropologist.
He's an academic.
Twice. Boom. Another academic. More and more of them, though, are coming on the show because more and more of them are coming to the field, too. Yes. So, which is good because we're getting that air of legitimacy when we have these types of people, this type of caliber of people that are taking an interest in Bigfoot. That's a good thing. And so that helps us a lot.
But Joel, a guy like Carlos, he's brilliant. This guy's brilliant.
Yeah.
There's no way he's going to waste one moment studying this topic unless he knows there is a really, really good chance that this needs to be studied, period.
Yep. That is so true, and so we're going to be talking about Carlos at the bottom of the hour. Okay, getting back to your high strangeness that you're talking about, Doug.
Hold on, I'm getting a bunch of weird messages. Did you ever get pop-up from
I do.
Software updates?
Sure.
And I'm like, no, and oh yeah, this keeps popping up.
Oh, that's good.
It says reload site.
Oh.
Changes you made, which I made no changes.
Okay.
May not be saved. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Cancel. Keeps popping up. There it goes.
Don't you hate
Third time was the charm. But anyhow, so I'm in my workshop.
Okay.
And then I had taken a break, sat down at the desk with a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And it's probably, I'm still drinking coffee till 2 in the afternoon.
Sure.
And I hear, and I've got the door open between my workshop and the kitchen, and I hear well, I don't even think I'm exaggerating to say it sounded like between 5 and 20 people were in my kitchen.
Damn.
I mean, that's a lot of noise.
And you didn't invite anyone over. So,
no. Doors locked, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm hearing it's hard to even describe. I'm hearing cupboards getting slammed, pots and pans, windows getting banged.
The hell?
Silverware in the sink. I hear what I think is talking.
And you're in your garage, am I correct? You're in your work area.
And it's quiet in there. There's no noise.
The door's open, probably joining the house. So you leave the door open.
I'm 10 feet from the kitchen.
And so you're sitting there working on your computer, doing whatever it is you're doing.
Yep.
And you hear, was it like muffled speech or could you hear it?
Yeah, it's my heart started racing so quickly that I'm not sure what I heard. Because
is that when
you go into that fight or flight, so I went into the fight mode. Yeah. Instant fight mode. And I grab a can of, let's just say pepper spray.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have grabbed other items.
Me personally, because I carry a lot, I would have grabbed my trusty Smith & Wesson.
I could have grabbed my trusty, Smith & Wesson too. I grabbed pepper spray only because I don't know what I'm dealing with here.
Well, it's non-lethal.
It's non-lethal.
At least the pepper spray,
I've got potent stuff.
Yeah.
One tiny drop even near you is going to knock you down.
And you don't want that sprayed in your house, though.
No, but I'm not worried.
If you can avoid it.
Not worried about it, but it's locked and loaded. I'm flying in the door. And it stops the moment I can see.
Ooh.
But this was no mistake. This was not like a little, you heard one thing. This was, like I said, between 5 and 20 people. It sounded like we're in my kitchen.
Having a party.
Like a party. No, not a party. Like whatever it was definitely trying to get my attention. And I just thought, well, maybe it came from the outside. Someone was on the deck, banging on the windows.
Sure.
I don't know. Who knows?
You try to rationalize at that point. You're trying to debunk
rationalize.
You're trying to think of every option there could be for that noise that you heard outside the option you don't want it to be.
Yep.
I hear you.
Oh, this pop-up thing's going to keep coming up, and I need to read my computer because I just do.
Well, you love your computer. You would be lost without your computer.
I'd be lost. Anyhow.
Could you imagine if we lost all smartphones tomorrow? How lost we'd all be.
Yeah, if the internet went down or
we were talking about that at work today.
Yep.
During the day, of course, I worked for Ozark. It's Part City. It's called. It's a subsidiary of O'Reilly's Auto Parts. And we were talking about phones. Just somehow we got on the subject of smartphones. And could you imagine if tomorrow we had to go back to rotary phones?
Yeah, a lot of people probably listening have never seen even a rotary phone or used one.
How great. Some said, boy, wouldn't that be great? The older folks, like guys my age, were like, that'd be no problem.
Reminds me of a story. So my first time I got an apartment, right? I was dirt poor.
And you had a rotary phone.
I had a broken rotary phone. So the phone, you couldn't use it. So then I discovered very quickly you could click the buttons. So if you click them 10 times, that equals 0. Or 9 times equals 9. You just put a pause in there. And so you could dial out that way. And so I used that for over a year and a half. Just like Morse code.
Yep. So you dial a number by clicking the receiver.
Clicking the things, waiting a little pause, and then more clicks, and another pause. And it was kind of inaccurate.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine.
So I would say every time I used it, I made one wrong number call.
So you were calling some really interesting places, I bet.
Yeah. Sometimes you were, how when you call a wrong number, sometimes you're really polite and go, oh, I'm sorry, wrong number. Other times you're just a creep and you just hang up.
Yes. Which one were you, Doug?
Or
you kind of vary it up a little bit?
Depending on what day it was.
Yeah, and the mood that was striking you at the moment.
Yeah. Whether you were hangry.
I'm the kind of guy that could do a wrong number and have a 2-hour conversation with the person.
I did that once and dated a girl. I made a wrong number call one time and ended up talking to her for hours. Then we ended up meeting. Then we ended up dating for like almost 2 years.
And there's how Blaine's here.
No. But that actually happened to me one time. A wrong number. Yeah, I'll never forget.
Wow.
Great lady, too.
Look at that.
Yeah, and she was older than I was. I was like maybe 12 and a half, 13.
You were only 13 years old?
She was
How old was she?
She was close to 17. She had a driver's
damn.
and everything.
You were getting into the old women older women back then.
I had a dirt bike. So I could, I had a full-size dirt bike. So
you had a way to see her then.
Yeah, of course. She lived up in Anoka, and I lived in Coon Rapids at the time.
And you dirt bike go over to Anoka.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, not a
action,
problem.
little trail action. And,
what was her first name?
Debbie.
Debbie.
Yep.
Debbie and Doug.
Yeah.
The dirt bike crew.
It was a wrong number thing, but she was great. Yeah, she was.
Was she cute?
Probably my first true girlfriend.
She kissed you, didn't she?
Oh God, yes.
Oh, look at that. Yeah. That was a real relationship for you back in those days.
Oh, yeah, we were pretty passionate.
Wow, man.
So
we're hearing about a side of Doug that we didn't even know existed. What a romantic.
Okay, you can just quit now, Joel. You can back her off, dude.
I had no idea you're such a romantic at heart.
Speaking of backing off, I'm changing this. Okay, we're talking about kind of sex, I guess, adolescent sex. But did you?
I never brought up sex.
You know, though, that
there's
a spider that if it bites you, you get a hard-on?
Wow, no, I had no idea. Why, one bit you and then that's running or what?
It can kill you.
Oh.
That's how it kills you. You get a hard-on so bad. Yeah, I'm not joking. It's called the Brazilian wandering spider. Swear to God.
So it bites you, and it gives you that beyond 4-hour erection that they warn you about the Viagra commercials?
It'd be probably like you taking 4 or 5 Viagras.
Oh, that's good.
You need treatment.
Yeah, you're going to have to get into the ER because you've had that erection longer than 4 hours. Yeah, I hear you.
Oh, yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But think about evolution. What in the world causes something to evolve to give you or any animal that bites an erection that kills it?
That is like the worst way. I mean, that is... I don't even know how to describe that. In the beginning, it's a blessing, and in the end, it's a curse. I'm not sure what to even...
Could you imagine? Oh, my God.
I could not imagine. The Brazilian wandering spider, you say?
Look it up, yeah. You should get a whole bunch of them, Joel.
I don't need them. I'm good. I am good. That is crazy. Wow.
But, and I think about that because I did spend a fair amount of time in the jungles in Belize. Yeah. And I did end up getting, they call it jungle jeopardy. I ended up getting quite sick.
Okay.
I was sick for, 10 years after that.
It's a huge spider, by the way.
No,
Holy crap.
No, I ended up getting in contact with the, oh my God, it's a certain kind of tick here. I know what it is. Oh, the cyan tick. So I got covered with them. I'm talking tons of them. So many that we would literally go to bed because we'd get back so late that we just leave them in overnight. Because it takes too long to get them out. They're so vicious. They burrow in so deep. It's almost like you got to have a buddy helping you getting them out.
Wait. What burrowed inside of you?
These cyan wood ticks.
If.
And anyhow, I ended up getting Rocky Mountain spotted fever. They just call it spotted fever down there. Rickettsia. Yeah. But, of course, I come back, and I'm starting to get headaches. I'm starting to get this, they call it the Pachytia hemorrhages all over my skin.
Okay. Jeez.
And the headaches got so bad. And I kept going to doctors, and they kept doing things like spinal taps and epilepsy tests and all sorts of bizarre things. And literally, I remember going to a neurologist and sitting in his office, and I just started crying because my headaches were that painful.
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, we're going to get you help, So what did they do? Give me another spinal tap. That didn't go anywhere.
Oh.
But then they were like, well, we don't want to give you antibiotics because you could have brain fungus, and that would then get really bad, and that can only be cured through operations. But they had to do tests to look for fungus in my brain.
Man.
Because I was doing a lot of splunking down there. and I was exposed to a lot of,
Jeez.
guano and all sorts of stuff. And the caves down in Belize are, let's just say, so many still are unexplored. I went down with a guy named Jaime Awe, Pete Zabrinski, who was Special Forces. And, of course, we had Tom Stewart, CBS journalist.
Yep.
And we were down there for Discovery Channel. And my job was camera guy. So I wasn't a producer. I was just a camera guy.
Yeah.
And I was responsible for not all the batteries, a tripod, all of the, back in those days we shot on tape still, this big giant camera. And those things are massive. They're 2 foot long.
Yeah, they're huge.
And I'm like, okay, now we're going to go into a water cave because the prime minister of archaeology didn't really understand that much of the fact that cameras can't really get wet.
Yeah.
So I have to figure out ways to get into these huge caves, sometimes for miles, and with water up to our waist in most cases. And then I had a good idea, and it was smart. I brought a little blow-up raft that I could put all the camera gear in and trail it behind me, even in the caves. Anyhow, to make a long story short, that trip damn near cost me my life.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's crazy. Really quickly, I did Google, and I kind of regret it now. The Brazilian wandering spider.
Yeah,
and these things are huge.
Yeah, they're big.
They're big. They're giant. They're
like tarantula size. Yeah,
but they're also known as banana spiders.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. People get bit while they're in the banana.
People have been buying bananas.
You see the connection?
And I'm reading this, and it's a real problem because they'll export the bananas.
Oh yeah, and they'll come into your home.
And there's a small percentage of people,
yes,
that have had these in their home that hitched a ride,
yes,
on these bananas. But generally speaking, it's the wild organic bananas that people might buy at a farmer's market that are the biggest offenders. The ones in your supermarket, not so much, because they come through and they're checked and they're dealt with.
Right, but Joel, you're missing the biggest joke of the century.
Huh?
They're found in banana plantations, and what did I tell you they did to you?
That is true. That is true.
Is that a coincidence?
It is a strange coincidence.
Yes.
That is true. Oh, by the way, I did sit down and I watched the documentary, and I don't know if you know who this person is, but you might have. Bob Ross. Do you remember him?
Oh, of course, yeah.
The painter guy.
Well,
they got a documentary out there.
I saw it already, Joel.
Happy Accidents, Betrayal, and Greed.
I saw it already. It's pretty damn good.
It is pretty good, but I had no idea that he was so embattled. That there were so many people trying to either take his money or take advantage of him. The guy was just a happy hippie.
He was just a nice guy. Yeah.
I just want to paint, right? Everybody else is making money off of him.
Yeah, he didn't go into it to become famous, or.
No, he didn't. No, he was probably one of the least people that wanted to be famous. He just wanted to paint.
That guy makes more money to this day after his death. He just.
Oh my God! Yeah. Yeah, the Bob Ross Inc. or whatever it's called that these people are still running. They're making bank off that dude.
It's Bob Ross everything. Oh my God, they sell everything Bob Ross. Type in Bob Ross swag. There's just everything you can imagine. My daughter wears Bob Ross shirts all the time, and
he died in '95, and he's just as relevant now as he was then.
Yeah,
which is amazing.
Yep.
But if you haven't seen it, I know a couple of people have asked me.
How did we go from spiders? Bananas.
Because I want to talk about something better than spiders jumping on bananas and giving me a hard on.
Whoa.
Not in that order, by the way. It's not because of the spider that I get the hard on. Just want to, make that clear. I'm not like that. But anyhow.
Well, if anybody wants to go into the jungles, don't.
Well, that's the moral of the story there. Just stay out of the jungle.
Well, there's all sorts of, there's this
don't do it.
disease called leishmania that you get from a sandfly, and it starts eating your skin. Then it can start eating your face.
I'll never have to worry because the only jungles I go to are the jungles of Ely.
Yeah, killer bee attacks.
All right.
Yeah, the jungle.
I stay in the jungles I know.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't go to these weird jungles and run around because I know that there's things there that want to kill me.
Yeah, but we do have killer bees, I believe, up here now, don't we?
I don't know if we. Oh, well, as long as you don't get
They're
the murder
close.
hornet,
They're really close.
you'll
I
get
did-
them.
I did an hour show on that. I produced an hour doc on killer bees, and
So are you gonna do one next in the murder hornet?
no, but there's 13,000 killer bee attacks in this country.
Really?
That's a lot of killer bee
But
attacks.
how many people actually die though?
If you get 500 stings or more, you're dead.
Well, true. Which is possible if you disturb a hive.
Right. They get
But bees generally leave you alone, right? But the killer ones now, they are aggressive.
they're hyper defensive, they call it. They just go nuts if you go near there, and they're relentless. They do want to kill you.
Wow. Man, well, thank God we have the murder hornet that'll take care of them.
Oh yeah, I know. They keep adding. Yeah, they keep adding. Like they brought in the Asian ladybug
Yeah.
to go after some other mite or some damn thing, and now everybody's getting hit by those things.
Yeah, we've had those Asian ladybugs here for a long time now.
Yeah, but why do they keep messing with nature?
I don't know. And really, I mean, we have the murder hornet, which is horrible, and they're
That's an
horrible
invader.
looking.
Yep, of course.
And so it's an invasive species. And then, of course, lately, just in my area, which if you've never been to northern Minnesota, is about the most pristine air and the most pristine water you're ever going to see in your life. They're finding zebra mussels in our lakes now.
And of course, they make the water even cleaner. Too clean.
Yeah.
Too clean.
Yeah.
They take
Too
all the
clean.
nutrients out.
Yeah.
I just wish we'd get some zebra mussels in my lake for like a couple of years and then get rid of
Just to
them.
clean it up. Yeah, but you have no pollution in your lake. It's no motor lake. Come on.
Oh, it's just fertilizer from
Is it even there anymore? I mean, with how dry it's been?
lawns, and it runs right into the lake.
Yeah, that is true. How much of a lake is left now that the drought happened?
And it came up a couple inches from all the storms, and then of course now we have beautiful weather. We had all that. Remember all that? Oh my God, you looked at the line of storms that hit Minnesota. It was just one after another.
Right. And we're still at a deficit, though. We're still very
big time.
dry.
14 inches, I think we're still.
Yeah, we're still very dry. So hopefully, well, they are predicting
Okay, Joe.
a huge winter.
We got off the bees. We just jumping around tonight. We got off the bee topic.
are.
I just
Come on,
got.
man.
It reminded me of a joke.
Okay.
What do you call your wife or girlfriend if they get stung by a bunch of bees?
What do you call them?
Call her
Honey?
Yeah.
God. Oh. See, I don't really want to talk about the spider anymore. And I didn't want to talk
noticed
about your high Rocky Mountain fever. And I didn't want, because quite honestly, the idea of the jungle scares the hell out of me.
It is.
Because I've been near jungles
Joe,
in my life.
okay,
yes.
here's one and I had one of these bot flies. So it's a little fly. It lays it stings you.
See, I
But
don't
it lays
want
an egg.
about
No, it
this.
lays an egg under your skin, and then it starts to grow. And then the larva hatches. And then that thing starts eating your flesh. And then
Are you trying to make me feel uncomfortable on purpose?
then you got to go to the
Because-
doctor to have it cut out. And it's like a big.
Oh, God. Oh, okay, Doug, you clearly want to talk about parasites. Okay.
Oh, then there's that. How about the parasite that swims in your pee hole? We'll just say that.
Yeah, the one that if you pee in the water, if you're underwater, it'll
Swim
hit you
up.
right up the stream.
Yeah, it goes.
Yeah.
And beds
Now,
grows and grows.
and grows. What's the worst parasite you ever had? And don't say your children.
Me, probably a botfly. Well,
So you had one of those.
I've had botflies in Giardia. I've had Giardia probably 20 times. I probably have a world record number of times I've gotten Giardia from drinking out of lakes and streams in the wild. Because when I'm thirsty, I'm drinking.
You don't care what the water looks
Well,
like.
you can deal with it later. Whatever.
You can deal with it later. Go up the stagnant pond. It's all green.
And then you go, and then a friend of mine, I noticed he was losing tons and tons of weight, and he's been going to the doctor. And I said, "Dude, have you been tested for Giardia?" And he goes, "No." And I'm like, "You need to go get a Giardia test,
Yeah.
because man, you lose weight. It's the most amazing weight loss program ever."
Yeah, but isn't it deadly?
Of course it'll kill you.
Of course it'll kill you. But on the way, you lose weight.
They have a pretty good treatment. You take this one type of it's a type of antibiotic they give alcoholics because it makes you violently ill if you drink alcohol.
Okay.
And so it's the same treatment for that they give you.
Same treatment that they give the alcoholics that make them want to throw up everywhere if they have a beer.
Right.
Yeah, I've heard of this drug.
Yeah, it's the same drug they give you for Giardia.
Gotcha.
You don't want to
stay away from booze.
Yeah, but
if you're on the Giardia.
You can actually even get it from a well. I mean, you can get it. Contamination from Giardia can happen from anywhere. They call it beaver fever.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Beaver feces, yeah. Oh. So then you drink the water and you get some of these chrysalis in your stomach.
God.
And it's not fun. Anyhow.
No.
But
it does not sound like fun at all. Yes, that's why I'm clearing my throat. I want to
go back to Carlos because there's something I want. Hopefully he'll talk more about it. But did you know, his professor was Grover Krantz, who was the first academic ever to get into the Bigfoot mystery.
Yep.
But believe it or not, I don't think that's why Carlos got into this. He'll tell you why he got into it. I don't think it had anything to do with his teacher, because his teacher, I'm sure, just taught anthropology. But Grover Krantz was the first academic studying the Bigfoot mystery. But did you know Grover said, hey, after I die, I want to keep teaching. So his skeleton is on display in a glass case at the Smithsonian, and his dog leaping up on him, which is also, of course, a skeleton.
Yeah.
He's at so keep that in mind while we're talking to Carlos. His boss is in a glass case at the Smithsonian. That's kind of weird. Kind of cool.
Yeah, because Grover, he passed away in 2002, if I remember.
He died of, I believe, pancreatic cancer.
Yeah.
And I got to talk to Grover's wife the day he passed. And I had called just to talk to Grover because I had sent them a copy of Legend Meets Science, and I knew he'd be really excited to see a scientific documentary on the topic. So I just called to follow up. I didn't hear back, and I talked to his wife, and she goes, Grover watched it and it put a smile on his face, and he passed away shortly after.
Man.
So, yeah.
Well, at least you gave him you made him smile, made him happy.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Guarantee it did. Yep, guarantee.
Yeah.
So that was his, his side mission besides teaching people anthropology.
Yep.
But if you're an anthropologist and you get to see footprints, you get to know what, you understand the bones that make up the foot, and you get to see that these are real.
Yeah. I'm looking at that picture, by the way, in the Smithsonian. That's quite the picture.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
That is very amazing.
I'm Alex Honnold, and while I'm usually outside rock climbing, I'm also the host of a new podcast from Rolex and the Washington Post creative group called Planet Visionaries. On the 4th episode, out now, I speak with Kirsten Forsberg about protecting an incredible marine creature, the giant manta ray. Check it out.
Quick Trip and Pepsi are teaming up with your Northland Ford dealers to award a new Ford Bronco Sport to one lucky Vikings fan in the opening drive sweepstakes. Ford's on-road manners, off-road ability, and slick interior designs will impress. So to enter, stop by your local Quick Trip, buy any 20-ounce Pepsi-branded product or pothole frozen pizza with your rewards card, and you're entered. Boom! If picked, you'll win $25 for every yard earned on the Vikings opening drive, and a chance to win a Ford Bronco Sport. No purchase necessary. Quick Trip. See you next time. Maybe in a Bronco Sport.
And what a great guy that he goes, hey, I want to keep teaching after I'm dead.
Yeah. He didn't want to give it up, and there he is. He's still teaching people as they walk through about the human anatomy.
Yeah, it's pretty.
About bone structure. That is something else.
I just wanted to get that backstory.
I'm glad he did. That's a whole lot better than talking about what bot flies or bloat flies or whatever it is you're talking about.
Brazilian wandering spider.
Yeah, better than that. Definitely better than that.
Yeah.
Jeez.
We could talk about tarantulas, the hair on their
tarantulas ain't nothing. I've seen those things, and it's like getting a bee sting. Don't
But
worry
they can
about
shoot
tarantulas.
their hair at you. You know that hair? They shoot that crap at you, and you can like get it in your eye,
Yeah.
and then they could even blind you permanently.
I would imagine, but I'm never going to be put in a situation where they're going to be shooting their hair at me. I'm good.
What if somebody mails you one for Christmas?
No one's going to mail me a tarantula for Christmas, and don't you give them any ideas.
I just did.
Don't you do that. Because, you know what? Your address is probably a lot easier to find than mine.
Oh, my God.
Think about that one.
Yeah,
right there.
well, I wouldn't go get the mail anymore. I'd be the end of it.
You know, yeah, you don't want that happening. Trust me. So anyhow, we gotta get out of here, Doug. We gotta go ahead. We're gonna go to break, and we come back, everyone. And we're gonna be shifting gears away from tarantulas and bugs that want to destroy you and kill you. And we're gonna be talking with Carlos Jiménez. Don't go anywhere. We're gonna be right back, God willing, right after this.
Hi, Tom Bodette. If you can hear me, then you have an internet connection, which means you can do cool things online, like listen to streaming radio, obviously, or watch a video of a monkey washing a cat. Let your freak flag fly. Or you can book a room at a great price at motel6.com. Isn't the internet wonderful? Everything you want right at your fingertips, and whoa, did not need to see that. I'm Tom Bodette for Motel 6, and we'll leave the light on for you.
Unexpected reactions to smart financial decisions brought to you by feedthepig.org.
Well, I finally did it. My student loan is totally paid off.
I can't believe it.
I can't believe it either. I paid more than the minimum each month, and soon enough, it was gone.
So you're just giving up?
Giving up on what?
The life of luxury. Egyptian cotton, caviar Thursdays, designer everything.
What are you talking about?
Our plan. What happened to winning the lottery and mastering the art of the perfect mimosa? Hosting galas, wearing enough jewelry to require a bodyguard, vacationing in the French Riviera, and then buying it.
I just thought maybe it was time to prepare for my future. You know, set some financial goals, make some smart investments, open a 401k.
Financial goals? Investments? A 401k? You are horrifying right now. Listen, if winning the lottery were easy, everyone would do it.
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs and the Ad Council.
Northern Tool and Equipment.
So me and the boys head out to tailgate today and find some other fans in our spot.
Well, it happens.
Cheering for the wrong team.
Oh, this is war.
Even worse, they've got this couch set up and everything.
A couch?
Yeah, it's sectional.
All right, first thing, don't ever use the word sectional again.
Done.
Second, I want you to grab a 4,700-pound tow chain with J-hook and grab hammer. Throw that on the back of your truck.
Got it.
Now you're going to Hail Mary the J-hook over the end of that couch. Time to find a better spot for your new friends.
That should do it.
There's no problem a little horsepower can't solve. Northern Tool and Equipment.
Taking a family of 5 to the amusement park can cost a small fortune.
Oh, yeah. So to save some money, we thought, hey, let's bring the amusement park to us. Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. Step right up, young man. Are you ready to ride the wacky waterfall?
That's just the bathtub with the shower head running.
Nope, it's the wacky waterfall.
It's the shower, Dad.
Waterfall.
Wacky.
There's an easier way to save. To get a free rate quote, go to geico.com. Then buy online, over the phone, or at your local Geico office.
Green light. Hey, girl. School zone. I'm getting hungry. Car changing lanes. You want to meet me for pizza? Stop sign. Intersection clear. Yeah, street. Pizza sounds good. Ballin Street? Girlin Street!
It's hard to concentrate on two things at once, like texting and driving. Stop the text, stop the wrecks. How will you stop texting and driving? Tell us at stoptextstopwrecks.org. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
And welcome back to Untold Radio AM. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me, as always, is Mr. Doug Hychek. He's sitting down in his chair. He can't hear us right now. So he's put his headphones. There he is. See, how can you be late for the intro for our guest? I saw you running around like a madman in your webcam.
Lights on in the little studio.
Well, yeah, I just had to share that with everyone that's listening. That before we start, Doug always goes, "Ah!" And he screams and waves his arms around. No, I'm just kidding. He doesn't go crazy.
Hey, you know how many times I've actually, because it gets dark, right? It's bright when we start.
He's afraid.
And pitch black when it's done. And I'm sitting there, I can't even read my notes.
Yeah. Well, tonight we have a great guest on tap, everyone. And this one, I talked to him earlier, and great guy, really insightful. I'm really looking forward to it. Carlos Jiménez. Jiménez is joining us tonight. And Carlos been around a while. He investigates, he's a mainstream academic. Very talented, very smart, brings a lot to the table, but he's also, I don't want to put words in your mouth yet, but Bigfoot believer. I want to say that so badly, but we're going to let him talk about Bigfoot. But a little bit about him. He has been educating people on extraordinary Bigfoot encounters and other mysteries, and just really going in the deep and dark corners of the jungle, exploring these myths, legends, stuff like that. The guy is the real deal. I mean, you're not going to find anyone more real than Carlos. Carlos has been an educator for a very long time. And then you heard at the top before he came on, he was actually, and it's escaping me because we just talked about, oh my gosh.
He studied under Grover Krantz.
There it is. It was escaping me just there for a second. And that's saying something, because that man was great.
Yep.
I mean, he was just great. And then being able to be his understudy, that's monumental achievement. So without any further ado, Carlos Jiménez is on with us. Carlos, thank you so much for coming on, taking your time and coming on and hanging out with us.
Well, thank you guys both for having me. I'm excited to do this. It's been great to connect with Doug here in recent times, and I'm looking forward to being able to work going forward with him on a project. And he's given me some insights for the project that I've been working on of my own, the documentary that we're trying to get put together and filmed this fall. And it's been a great. It's been a great life of encounters and hearing people's stories, and it was pretty quiet for a long time. I was actually just out of the scene and teaching, high school and middle school students, science and math and STEM type classes, and then of course coaching. I enjoy coaching as well. But then a couple years ago, my girlfriend and I had an encounter in New York State, and suddenly the top was off the jar once again, and I was out there, actively pursuing information and trying to get caught up. I'd been out of the loop for almost 20 plus years from the time where I was a student of Krantz's up at Washington State at Wazoo, and at that time, I certainly was, very active in doing research and really being paid as a cryptozoologist to go and look for things like the Mokele Mbembe, the dinosaurs over in the Congo that the pygmies were saying that they were seeing alive, and that we, as Western science people, believe have been extinct. So yeah, I've had a great life, and I appreciate that intro, and a lot of great experiences. But it'd been a long time for me personally until a couple of years ago, and now in these last 2 years, I've had another lifetime of experiences because of the people I've met and the places I've been able to go during these last couple of years.
Well, let's talk. Oh, go ahead, Doug.
Well, I was just going to ask him, maybe you could start out and just tell us what changed everything, the sighting. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, and of course, when this happened, it prompted me to start a website and to create a brand and all the things and to get back involved and meet all the people that have been, doing things for the last 20 years that I just wasn't aware of, because I've not really been in the loop other than friends and family sending me, Bigfoot memes or Bigfoot stories that made the AP wire. Because, all my family and friends know me as the Bigfoot guy, but a lot of them honestly never knew that I had an encounter. Now my students did, because I shared that with students, and my friends, but not everyone had known. But a couple of years ago, it had been 20 some years. The last encounter I'd had prior to the one that got me back involved was back when I was a student of Dr. Kranz's, and it happened up in the Blue Mountains in Washington State. And at that time, I was out, researching or going after, investigating a report that had come into the university to him of a creature that had broken down some trees and twisted some saplings and left some blood behind. But at that time, that was the last, and in that evening, I had a sighting. And so 20 some years later, 20 years later in a career go by, and I mentioned during the break before we came on the air that I had a near-death experience in my 20s, and that's really kind of what took me out of, derailed me from the research that I'd been doing and the start that I'd gotten under Dr. Krantz, and I kind of went to the mainstream world. But 2 years ago, my girlfriend and I, during a summer break where I drive the country, she and I had gone up into Canada through Michigan. We just missed your state, went a little south of you, but we went up in through Michigan and then crossed over into Canada and drove up into Toronto. And we came down through Vermont, and we stopped at a couple of Native American museums, and they were telling us about some lore of this mountain in New York State called Gahai in their language, and which when I looked it up online, it was translated to Witch Light Mountain. So there's this place called Witch Light Mountain in the Allegheny National Forest, which crosses the border of Pennsylvania and New York. Well, we went for a drive, continuing on to my hometown, which is in Meadville, Pennsylvania. So we were coming from the Finger Lakes area down through New York State. I actually went and we stopped and visited my nephew at the time, was at Fort Drum. Shout out to Alec Taylor, because he's hoping to do some of this kind of stuff with his career. He's in college now studying media, but we came through, and I was really interested from the time we hit Michigan in the tree structures. I started seeing these tree structures all along the sides of the road that I'd been hearing about on podcasts, because at that time I just discovered podcasts. I hadn't really, again, for years listened to any of those, and started listening to them on that road trip. And so I stopped and was taking pictures along the way, and we saw these two trees. I saw these two trees, and I pulled over, and it was in the vicinity of this place called Gahai. And so when I took the photographs, I had rolled my window down and literally just pulled off the side of the road. And in this road in that location, the Allegheny River was down to the right, probably 30 or 40 yards through, woods downhill. And then there was a guardrail there. And on the left side, it was a 2-lane road, 55 mile an hour, so there was quite a bit of traffic. It was July 3rd. So it was a day before, the 4th of July holiday. So there were people, coming and going through the national forest there. And it just rained. And as I'm taking this picture from the top of the mountain to the left, because there the mountain, rises up. And this was supposedly this Witch Light Mountain. And it was about 6 at night in the summertime. So it was light out. I could see, clearly what I was taking a photo of. And as I took this photo, I hear this jibber jabber coming down from the top of the mountain that sounded very, very much like the Sierra sounds, the famous Sierra sounds recorded back in the 70s. And, I can't give you the exact jibber jabber that I heard, but definitely it was loud and it was directed towards me. But it definitely wasn't speech, our kind of speech. It was something like speech, though. And it didn't sound like an animal type vocalization. It sounded like, two big people were up there yelling. And so I hurried up and was like, oh my gosh. And I'm trying to flip my camera from photo over to video. And I start taking a video, and I've actually posted that one on my YouTube channel and on the website. But unfortunately, again, it's just an iPhone 11. So you're hearing a lot of cars going by. You're hearing, me turning back and forth. But what I'm hearing while I'm filming this is, as I start to film, I hear the jibber jabber a second time. And then behind me, between me and the Allegheny River, I suddenly hear whoop, whoop, whoop. And I turn around because it hit me. It hit my body. It shook me.
It was close then.
It was very close, and it was the amplitude alone was, put it out of range of any other thing that it could have been. And in the video, you see me literally jump up and do a 180 and start filming the trees down below me. And as I'm doing that, then behind me again, up on the hillside, I hear what sounds like something coming down the hill, mountain, but it's the Appalachians. Yeah. So compared to out west, they're really, glorified hills, but it was big. I mean, it was definitely mountainous. It was very, probably 300, yards vertical up to wherever the top of the hill was. Well, now I'm turning back because I'm hearing these branches breaking, and it sounds like right in the area where I took the photograph. But again, now I'm filming, and as I jump around and turn to see, is something coming down the hillside that I can see, the thing behind me starts to go from a whooping to more of a woofing. And so now it's doing like a whoop, woof, woof. And then in the progression, I'm turning back and forth now because the one behind me will start making noise like these woofs, and I turn to that. As soon as I turn to that, then the one that was on the mountain will start to either the jibber jabber happen 2 more times, and the breaking of the sticks happen 2 or 3 more times. Gotcha. And I turned around, and with my own eyes, I didn't see anything at the time. I could hear it. I should have been able to see something, but it was the middle of the summer, and the foliage was thick. So there was a good amount of green leaves on everything. And I filmed, though, and later, in blowing up the film, I think I did capture the subject, and I've posted some still images of that on the website, and tried to use those as thumbnails. Unfortunately, what I've learned in the last 2 years is that there's a whole series of photos of that nature known as the blob squatch, or the green squatch, or whatever the different names that it goes by. But but I definitely know that what I'm seeing in there was something, because we went back 2 nights later. And what I captured, we recreated the photo from the same location. I shot in the same direction, and the object that I saw in the daytime wasn't there. So it wasn't a tree stump. It wasn't, a mix of shadows and light. It was definitely an object. It was something that was there. And I believe that I captured one looking at my girlfriend. And in the video, I go around the car at the end of this, and she's finally rolled her window down, because she kept her window up during all this, and she rolls her window down, and I said, "I know you heard that. I know you heard that." And she said, "What did it sound like to you?" And now she grew up out here in Crescent City, California, and she said that it sounded like a barking seal. And so again, like this creature was trying to mimic. It started with its typical whooping, but then it tried to mimic a dog. And in the end, to her, it sounded like a barking seal. I don't know if you two gentlemen, and I'm pretty sure Doug has at some point, either on recordings or otherwise, but if you've ever heard them mimicking, they do a decent job of sounding somewhat like the creature, but a lot of times the animal that they're trying to mimic, they're going to get the volume really high, and there's going to be something that's just a little bit off about it. Yeah. And so that was my first time hearing them, period, in my whole life. I'd never heard them. I'd had my earlier encounters, I'd seen them, and one encounter I'd smelt them, but I'd never heard them making sounds other than, movement sounds. And so this was my first time not only hearing them vocalize with the whoops, but breaking branches, either as communication or to get my attention, to keep me turning. They did a good job of keeping me turning back and forth and back and forth. And of course, then I heard the Sierra sounds coming from one of the individuals. But in the end, I wasn't able to see one walk out of the wood line or anything like that day. Sure. But with my experience and the corroborating experience of my girlfriend Renee, I really felt like we'd had a close encounter. And so a couple days later, I was able to get some family members to come back up there with me, because it's about a couple hour drive, 2.5 hour drive from my hometown in Pennsylvania to get back to that location. But we came back up there, and I recreated and took the shots, and I got them to actually go up on the hill with me, the hillside to where this thing supposedly was. And when we got up there, it was a game trail. And what was interesting about this game trail is that the location where the individual was breaking the sticks, or made it sound like they were walking, and snapping sticks. Yeah. I found no sticks, but I found on the tree there that branches had been broken off. You could see what was left, and it was, they were fresh breaks. But whatever it was had taken the branch that it was snapping with it. There were no branches on the ground. However, there was a pine tree that had been carried from somewhere and laid across the game trail there. And the individual that I saw was just down the trail from that. So I was talking to Doug recently that, my hypothesis is that maybe we had gotten there at a time where they were foraging, or maybe they were running an ambush hunt, mainly because, and the reason I hypothesize that is because of the locations, and because that there was a, I don't know if we want to use the word elaborate communication, but they were using communication. And the one thing maybe I didn't mention is that the communication that they were using, not the breaking, but the vocalizations, the verbal sounding ones, the ones that sounded like a language, literally were hitting my body and vibrating it. Like there was a shaking in the core of my body that I can't describe in any other way than, in the time since, doing some research, as some kind of infrasound, some kind of sound that my ears weren't hearing, but that my body was feeling was coming from and emanating from the source of the sounds that my ears were hearing. And especially and absolutely from the thing that was closer to my body. And now, again, that may have just been the amplitude, because of the proximity, but it was not just loud. I could feel it. I'm not going to say that the hair blew back on my head because I'm a bald man and I don't have much hair, but I'm going to be, I've gone on record and I'll continue to go on record to say that something about the vocalization, disturbed my body, shook my body, vibrated, or something otherwise in some way affected my body. And I believe, if there is a belief to it, my hypothesis from my experience, I believe that it must have been sound waves of some sort that were below what my ears could hear. Based on, again, what I've researched since that time. So that just opened the whole subject back up to me, because when you have an encounter, it doesn't matter how many you have. As soon as you have that encounter, your adrenaline is up, your curiosity is peaked. I mean, some people, I'm sure there's terror or there's fear because it's the unknown.
Yeah.
And in my case, I would say there's probably always a little trepidation, but I jumped out of the car. I started filming. I was running around,
you went after it.
I didn't go up into the woods. And the funny part of this story, I hate to do this to, I love my Renee, but she'll get a kick out of this. The funny part of the story is I was wearing shorts and flip flops, and she was more concerned about me running up and getting ticks than encountering whatever it was that we were hearing on either side of us. And so that gave me a laugh. But I don't know. I could tell you more of the post story, but that's really what got me back into it. Was, I had a renewed curiosity. I'd never heard these things before in my life. Like I said, I'd seen them in after dark twice, so it was mostly silhouetted. But I'd seen them moving. I'd seen the size of them, and in my very first encounter, I smelled one. And again, I don't know that they all smell or not, because I've only smelt them once in my life, and it
what
was.
Did you smell?
It's what most everybody describes it. For me, I was barely 9 or 10 years old, and it just smelled like, at first I thought, oh, that's a rotting animal, because it was summertime, nighttime. But there's just such a strong wet dog kind of a smell that was associated with it. And in my case, I described it like almost like a matchstick, like a little bit of sulfur. It was just a hint of that, but the overwhelming smell was just rot and waste. Yeah. It was, and it hits you like a wall. It hits you like instantly. A wet blanket. And what was funny, well, not funny, but the thing I remember the most about the time that I smelled one was that before I even smelled that, the hair was standing up on the back of my neck. So like, I was walking back from my friend's house, and I was a kid, and I froze, and then the smell hit me. Like the smell wasn't the thing that froze me. I believe my memory is that the smell came after, but that even before I smelled it, I was frozen in my tracks, and my hair was standing
there. Yeah,
it's something, and it was quiet. I just, in a lot of my encounters, there's an eerie silence, like the air stops moving. And again, I don't know if that's related to people having car accidents, how everything goes quiet and goes into slow motion. I don't know if there's an aspect of our biology that it would account for it, but I can say that, from that very first instance, it felt like everything in the woods was silent. No bugs, no wind, no air. And then, the commotion started when at that time I had a little Star Wars gun because I was a little kid, and it was either late 70s, early 80s. And I pulled the trigger on that gun, and whatever it was at the time, I'd never heard or seen of this thing. And so I thought it was a bear. I thought I'd startled a bear because the next thing I heard was trees and branches and everything else breaking, going down this ravine to the creek that ran down to our place. It ran through the farm, and it ran down to where we lived, and then on into the swamp. But this thing, broke a whole bunch of branches and knocked some trees down going down the hill. I thought it had fallen. Now I'm not sure it wasn't some kind of a reverse bluff charge or something. It wasn't charging towards me, but it was definitely sounded, I've heard my friend who's going to be in this documentary, Kirk Stewart, has referred to it like a Cat 9, a DC, caterpillar going through the woods. That's, when he explained what he meant by that, I was like, that's what I heard when I was a kid. Like, it sounded like something was taking trees out. But as a kid, it must be a bear falling down the hill. I must have startled it with my toy gun. And that's what caused me to not have any fear. And I walked forward a little bit to look down the pathway to see, because there was a path in the hillside not far from where I was standing where I could see down to the creek. And that's when I saw the thing step out and seemingly turn to look at me and take a step off into the woods. And that was it. So all I saw was just a step into the creek, and then it was gone. But that image, I could paint that image to this day. Like, I can still see that first image, and that first encounter is one that I kept to myself for a long time, other than telling one of the local farmers who asked me, promise me you won't say anything about this and I'll take care of it. That's what he told me. And so I never saw it again, so I assumed he took care of it, so I never spoke about it.
Carlos, did you end up taking...
I'm Alex Honnold, and while I'm usually outside rock climbing, I'm also the host of a new podcast from Rolex and the Washington Post creative group called Planet Visionaries. On the 4th episode, out now, I speak with Kirsten Forsberg about protecting an incredible marine creature, the giant manta ray. Check it out.
We can sum up McDonald's new crispy chicken sandwich in one word: crispy. But also juicy and tender. Maybe crispy, juicy, tender, all one word? Okay, fine. You'll just have to try our crispy chicken sandwich to understand it.
Now get free medium fries and a free medium soft drink with a purchase of our crispy chicken sandwich. Available only on our app. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Prices and participation may vary. McDonald's app download and registration required.
The class with Grover because of your early sighting, or didn't have anything to do with it?
No, you know what? There was a connection there. Over the years, then I, went through high school, and I probably wrote most of my papers on video games and electricity because I was a typical kid, and we moved away from the countryside, and when I was in the 7th grade, we moved to a town called Meadville, and we'd been living in this place called the Village of Custards. And the Village of Custards is a more rural area, and it was in a different school district. So I went to a bigger school district, and by no means, don't get me wrong, this isn't like a 5A huge school. I now at the time I thought, wow, I'm in a big school, but I've now taught at way larger schools in Texas and LA. So I know that we were a bigger school for that area, though. Rural western, northwestern rural Pennsylvania. Meadville was kind of a center point, equidistant from Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Buffalo. So give you kind of a geographic idea that about 90 miles away from my town, you could get to any of those airports. But
how big was your graduating? How big was your
graduating class? We had 330. We had about 330.
Okay, that's a decent size.
So it's a decent size, yeah. Like I said, I don't want anybody to get me wrong. It wasn't a tiny school. It wasn't a rural. Like I had been in an elementary school with probably 12. 15 kids to a class, and it was one building, with one classroom for each. But this was a bigger school, but it wasn't huge. But we weren't a huge school, but we were definitely bigger. So from high school, I went to college, and in college, Dr. James McKenna, who was known for his SIDS research, sudden infant death syndrome, I ended up taking a class. I was actually pre-med at Pomona College, and thought I was going to be a doctor someday, or something along those lines. But But then I took an anthropology class from Dr. McKenna, and in that intro to physical anthropology class, he was talking about Gigantopithecus. He was talking about Bigfoot, and I'll never forget like waking up in a class, like a light going on, and I went up to him at the end of that class and I said, "Is this something I could study seriously?" And he's like, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, because at Pomona we did a senior project, or a thesis if you wanted to." And so I said, "Could I do my project on this?" And he's like, well, "Absolutely." So I switched gears and switched departments. I went from pre-med, and I went pretty much straight into anthropology, with some psychology, but I got very focused in anthropology at that time. So it was Dr. McKenna who actually opened the door for me to consider the subject seriously. So I tip my hat to him to this day. I thank him wherever he's at now. But again, like, that wasn't the focus of his research. He was looking at sudden infant death. But he was a very well liked and very well respected faculty member when I was there, and he turned me on to it. But in that, then, as part of my project, I flew up to Washington State to interview Dr. Grover Krantz, who had at the time, 1992 or 93, written the book Big Footprints. And I had read the book and was fascinated by the book, and a lot of people maybe meeting some famous actor or movie star or whatever would be a highlight, but for me, getting off that plane in the snow and meeting the Dr. Grover Krantz for me was kind of my rock star moment in life.
Sure. And you developed a friendship.
We developed
with him,
a
right?
friendship, a relationship, and I immediately decided, hey, I'm going to go to graduate school and I want to study under you. And when I did my interviews and met with the faculty there, I remember the department head, who was a cultural anthropologist, was fully in support of me doing a thesis on Bigfoot. And so, yes, Washington State was definitely kind of catapulted me into the reality of actually doing, at Pomona, I was doing, what I would call research, looking stuff up online, finding videos, book and computer research. With Dr. Krantz, I was able to not only have conversations with him about the experiences that he was having and thoughts of the day. I mean, every day, literally every day while I was there, I would meet him in his office and we would chat before he went to teach class, because I was his TA. I was his teaching assistant. And we had a group, it was a group of graduate students that we were all studying under him. It was a small group, maybe 4 of us. We took a lot of classes that were classes of 4 with him, where we would learn how to make molds and how to make casts. And, and it was everything from primate bones and the bones of early hominids, Australopithecines, robustus, what have you. And then the stuff that, he'd gathered, all of his footprints. I mean, I want to say he had like 110 different molds, that we would make. And one of the students was like running a website back then on like Angel Fire, selling the casts. And so we would, as part of the class, learning how to do it, we would make copies of those. But then after 30 or so copies in a mold, you'd have to make a new mold so that, the mold didn't deteriorate. And of course he had all the famous, tracks from, the Patterson Gimlin film and many more, which the Smithsonian now has all of those, as far as I know. There may be some, I believe that maybe Dr. Muldrum has some of his, but I don't know if they were firsthand or if they were copies that were made by others. But I can tell you that in the early 90s, if you got a plaster cast of a Gigantopithecus skull or a Bigfoot track or anything else, that it could have been me that made it for you as part of
very cool.
As part of my classwork.
Do you have any stories about Grover that you and Grover, and kind of insights? Because boy, there's a lot of people that really do worship Grover. He was an amazing guy. I watched him on TV since I was quite a young kid.
Live here. And we are back, everybody. Welcome back to Untold Radio AM. I'm your host, Joel Sturgis. Right along with me is Mr. Doug Hychek. I do apologize for that little bit of technical difficulty, but through the magic of editing, you didn't hear any of it. So we are back, and right in the middle of telling us what it was like to be the understudy of Dr. Krantz. We kind of went staticky on my end. I do apologize, everybody. But what was it like for you, Carlos?
Well,
studying under Grover.
He was, he was as I mentioned earlier, he was pretty much the man that you saw on TV. Now, most of the time, if you saw him on a TV show, it was obviously almost always about Bigfoot. Although the man did write books, about the cultural language movement and different geographic races and descent groups. He had a lot of different anthropological publications that weren't Bigfoot related. So just that's one thing I think most people might not know is that, he actually was known, much like Dr. Meldrum today is known for his primatology. He's a professor of primatology, but yet, Bigfoot is something that he does. It's on the side. That's not his, main job is teaching Bigfoot. Just like Dr. Krantz didn't talk about Bigfoot on a day-to-day basis in the classroom. He was teaching physical anthropology or osteology or what have you. But he had a very good, I guess that my memories of him are a couple. The one is that, I met him in the early, early mid-90s when the PC movement for me, like I first encountered it. And so now we're having kind of another wave of that. He was not a very PC individual. I'll never forget the day when I was a student of his in his classroom. And he goes, "Today you're going to meet my kids." And he grabbed a big box off the top shelf and he dumped a bunch of bones in front of us. And they were children's bones because we were learning about, developmental osteology. We were learning about the differences between, adult bones and the developmental stages of humans. And so that was his way. Like he had kind of a dry humor that may not be received well in the modern times. And I remember when we finished the last year there with him, he had us over. One of his dogs had passed away, and he buried it in his yard. And again, with most people, if you lose a pet, you might bury it. That's not unusual. But with a physical anthropologist, when a physical anthropologist buries his dog, at least Dr. Krantz, he put wire down and plastic and buried it, and then a few months later unearthed it and rearticulated it. And actually, if you go to the Smithsonian now, once he passed away, shortly after I was a student, he donated his body to science, but under the specifics of if you're going to have my body, you're also going to have my dog. And so if you ever get the backstage pass that I once had with Dr. Doug Owsley, who's the head of physical anthropology at the Smithsonian, he can take you to the drawer and you can pull the drawer out, and there's Dr. Krantz and his dog Ralph. Their bones are in there in the same drawer. That was part of his stipulation. But yeah, he was really interesting. But at that final time I spent with him was a little celebration of his dog's life and our end of our school year. And I'd had an encounter that year, and in the Blues Mountains, and he had a cast of a skull, and in the top of the skull, it's called the calcavarium, that part of the skull where you just get the eye, like the brow ridge and the top part of the skull. Sure. And he poured some. I wouldn't say he was a big drinker, but he poured some wine, some Franzia from a box, into this copy of a skull cap, and passed it around. And we all drank from this, kind of not really ritualistically. I'm realizing as I retell this, it kind of sounds like some weird ritual, but it really wasn't. But I said, well, is this a famous skull? Because I'd never come across this one. He said, well, that there's dead Ernest. And so I hope that doesn't paint him in a bad light, but paints him in a more like this is a real guy. He was a professor. He was educated. He very much put his career on the line when it came to putting it out there about Bigfoot. And he was what I would call a true believer. I don't think he went to his grave knowing. I think he believed that Bigfoot was out there, but he'd never seen one that I was aware of. I never heard of a personal anecdote. He certainly saw his share of evidence, and very good evidence, which is why he felt that evidence was compelling enough to put his career on the line over it. Sure. And that went on even while I was there. I mean, and to that point, I remember like Japanese film crews coming in, and I'd have to set the lab up. And when I say a lab, we're talking about basically his office, which was 90%, casts and molds and shelving. Yeah. I mean, we had a tiny table in there that we called that a classroom. Now, he had other classrooms at Washington State. I'm not trying to in any way make Washington State sound chintzy. It's just that like he crammed a lot into his office. And that's kind of where they would usually set up, because otherwise you got to move all those casts out. And so if you ever go back and see any of those documentaries or films where he's in, you'll almost always see where they're all shots from his office. So,
Wow, man, he sounds like he was a heck of a guy. But I mean, he had more interest than just Bigfoot, and he was well known for being the teacher. But he's also he had a good sense of humor about him too. And so. Because most of us remember him most vividly from his Bigfoot work, but he had a whole other body of work as well, where Bigfoot was more, like he'd said, kind of like a side passion, not necessarily his main drive.
Yeah, but it was definitely, we talked about Bigfoot almost every day, because I was young and I had all kinds of ideas of, well, what if we study where bears go to die? I'll never forget having that conversation with him for weeks. It's like, has anybody ever studied, like, put collars on bears or tagged them and maybe given them an injection that made them sick, but not something that would kill them, but made them feel really bad, so that then we could then track where they go, because maybe then we could go and do archaeology in those places and find a body, and prove that they exist. Because, of course, the thing that made him the most controversial was, he wanted, I don't want to say he wanted to shoot one, but he was well known as, the only way that we're going to save the species is to have a body, because science wasn't accepting any of the, the mountain of evidence that's just been continued to grow since he was alive and since I was a graduate student. I mean, we had plenty of DNA evidence. We had plenty of, biological trace evidence at that time. And again, science demands a body. And so, he became pretty well known, along with John Green and others, as the camp of, shoot one. And I don't want people to think that that's what he thought every day. Like, it wasn't like he went to bed with a smile on his face thinking, let's go out and bag one. That was just, again, a logical solution to the conservation issue. Like, how can we conserve this species? And I know that I've read all the arguments out there. I don't want to get people riled up in the different Bigfoot camps out there in the Bigfoot world and the community right now. It's simply, I'm just trying to set the record straight in terms of how I perceived him as a student. And I really think that the shooting one was simply the only way to solve the problem. Again, if there was one wish I could have for the man, is that he could have had any one of the encounters that I have, so that he would have gone to his grave absolutely knowing. Kind of to your point, Joel, earlier, when you kind of introduced me, I always tell my kids that I'm not a Bigfoot believer. I don't believe in Bigfoot, because for me, the word belief inherently deals with faith and things that cannot be looked at scientifically. I mean, for me, if there's empirical evidence, if you can put something through the scientific method, if you have trace evidence, if you've got biological evidence, then you've got something to research. There's something there. And at that point, even to me, the belief is no longer a part of the equation. It's, what is this? What does this belong to? What did this come from? And for me, having with, again, scientific method, what are your senses? Seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, hearing. I heard one of these things. I've smelled, I've heard these things. I've smelled these things. I've seen these things. And I don't even like to use the word things anymore. I find myself moving to the word beings because of the experiences that I've had with them. I'm of the belief, if you will, if there's a place where I can use the word belief, but it's my hypothesis, really, that the evidence of my own personal experiences and the anecdotes of others and their personal experiences point to what I would say is some kind of being, some type of being. Whether it's a human being, an ape being, an alien being, I don't know. I mean, but as a scientist, what I've encountered is something that's of our world. At least when I've encountered it, it's been something that I've seen, smelled, and heard. I have not. I would say that the smell was strong enough that if you ever smelled it, you would probably say that you tasted a Bigfoot too, because the smell hits you, and there's no way to not have that in your back of your mouth and on your tongue from the smelling it. But I've not touched one, as far as I know. I know a few people that might have, but at this point that I've talked to, but even they've tried to convince themselves that, oh no, that was a mountain beaver or something of that ilk, to justify in their own minds, because there are people that are out there doing the same thing that I'm doing, and that Doug and others are doing. That's just trying to get more of this physical trace evidence, video evidence, audio evidence, genetic evidence, whatever evidence we can get this side of a body. I mean, of course, again, I hate to use the word gold standard, but that's science is not going to accept it until, we've got either a living one or the remains of an entire, dead one.
Well, we almost need a body, though, don't we? I mean, really, at the end of the day, to truly put it to bed.
I agree.
Not saying to go out and kill one, but maybe if we find a specimen that's died of natural causes in the woods, that'd be the ultimate.
Well, absolutely. And again, that's where my ideas in grad school for Dr. Krantz, because even then, like I said, there wasn't like a big online community or anything at that time that I saw people going one way or the other. But I did enough surveys for my undergraduate research and as a grad student for him about what people's feelings would be about shooting one or not. And I could just see in that small data pool that this was not something that most people, supported, regardless of the science, was going out and killing one of these things. And so I was constantly trying to come up with ideas and ways, tests, et cetera, that we could do to come up with a way to find a body. Like, I really, really wanted to just be able to come across the body, especially with the stories that would come in from people who claim to have shot one. Well, if one's already been shot, well, let's at least get that body or get a bone from that body. But without getting into all the why.
Yeah, there's a lot of political. Yeah. There's a lot of negative and political implications to talking about getting a body.
Yeah.
In the Bigfoot community.
What I'm curious about, when did Grover have his aha moment? Because I know he was really famous for the I think it was the Cripplefoot track.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that certainly had an impact on him. And didn't he have a handprint too?
Yeah, he had. Well, I know that we had there. Again, I'm not exactly sure what the origins were. In fact, I've got one of them here in my office up here in Crescent City. But he had a couple of handprints. Again, these were prints that I don't think he personally went out and took. The thing about the majority of the stuff, the majority of the track evidence, it came to him because he was at a university. But I don't know that he actually was the one that was there pouring the material. Now, the Skookum cast, I know that was the last big hurrah for him, with a bunch of the modern Bigfoot guys that are out there now. But that Skookum cast, which for those that in the audience that aren't familiar with it, it's a body cast they found, where something was laying down in a big mud puddle, and they got hair and other things from that. That was a huge cast. Like, it was.
Yeah, we're going to actually have the founder on next week.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Richard Knoll. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah. So you'll hear more about that. Again, I only bring that up as to say, like, I know that was the last cast that I'm familiar with him being associated with, but I don't know what the very first cast was, other than I know that he extensively looked at the Patterson-Gimlin film.
Yeah.
I know that he extensively had every one of those tracks.
Yeah.
We had all of that cast.
I just wondered, though, Carlos, if there was something he had passed on, his big aha, my light bulb went off, these things are absolutely real.
I don't know. I really think that it was the Patterson-Gimlin film for him, because he was a student at Berkeley. That's where he got his PhD to become a professor. And, and Berkeley has a great primatology program. They always have. And I think that it was during his time there. And, I think that was pre-In Search Of. I think that's when he got interested, and he started, along with, again, all the other things that he was doing, researching it. And at some point, I think that probably the turning point for him, if it wasn't the cast that you're referring to, where the individual had a broken foot and the bones, and he reconstructed the bones to show. And those tracks, for the people, again, in the audience who aren't familiar with the Bossberg tracks from Washington State, this trackway was like hundreds of casts in the original, and so or hundreds of footprints in the trackway, and many of them were cast. And again, the individual had a right foot that was leaving a normal print, and a left foot that had been broken and healed. Well, and then in addition, they found prints from that individual years later again. And again, it was the same individual. And so that was a big compelling piece for him. The dermal ridges that the detective in Texas examined, Timothy, I never met him.
Jimmy Chilcutt.
Jimmy, okay, apologies. I've not met him, but I mean that cast I saw many times, and again, it's famous because they're dermal ridges that don't match known primates. They're ridges that other primates have, but they're organized in a manner that's not the same as hominoids, humans, and not the same as gorillas, and not the same. And so it's those lines of physical evidence that I know that Dr. Krantz was fascinated by. And again, that's why I would say that, yeah, he went to his grave wanting, to have seen one or to have encountered one. He used to take his dogs with him. He had big Irish wolfhounds. But in the time when I became a student, he was getting a bit older, and he's a big man, but he just wasn't as mobile, just wasn't out there going up and down the mountains.
So what is your elevator pitch to other academics to get them to look at this? What would you tell them if you could talk to every academic in the world? What would you tell them to convince them or prod them into investigating this topic?
That's a great question. I mean, it's one that I've thought about, during my whole career, not just as an anthropologist, but as a teacher. And, how do you convince somebody of something that or at least convince them to look at something to help them understand why, you're so passionate about a topic like this. And, I don't know what the answer is to that, other than to say that, to me, my pitch would be, look, okay, you're an entomologist, great, but why just study the bugs that everybody knows? What about these bugs that people are claiming to see? Why not study those as well?
Right.
I just think that whatever a person's field is in science, there's two aspects of science that I teach my students and that I feel are critical. I mean, anthropology is a science, by the way. And what I think is critical about this, to teach the kids and to reach out to the professionals about, is to remember two things. One, it's very important to be a skeptic. You can't be a scientist without being a skeptic, but you can't be a skeptic without looking at the evidence.
Right.
I mean, that's just having an opinion, and everybody's got one of those, especially on social media. If you're not willing to look at the evidence, then you need to really, I think, as a scientist, examine your career. Are you really a scientist, or are you just some kind of proselytizer who's out there trying to get people to follow stuff that we already know? Like what's the value in just repeating the stuff that we know and not looking at the things that we don't know? Use your training, use your skills as a scientist to examine, to get your chops on the stuff that we do know. Again, whether it's the trees in the forest, the mushrooms that grow on them, or the bugs that crawl in the bark. But now open your skepticism, but open your eyes up to what other people are seeing, and do some research on it. And it's not like people are saying online, oh, do your research. No, do you really go out in the field, really go out, really look at a footprint, really examine it, really look at some of the hair, really talk to these people, have them psychologically analyzed, evaluated, have them do a lie detector, whatever it's going to take for you as a professional to broaden what you're looking at in terms of your own personal research. Again, and what people don't understand, I think, sometimes, is that not all scientists are researchers. I've been a scientist who's mostly been a teacher.
But why do you think, Carlos, that this is such a great mystery to study? What can it do for all of us?
The upside is infinite. I mean, to me, the upside is infinite, but I think that part of that potential upside is the reason that there's such hesitancy, because human beings don't like change, and to make it, to make for instance, let's call it the Bigfoot phenomenon, to make that a known fact would literally change everything. It's not just going to be, oh, we've got a new primate. Oh, hey, all these stories have been true. It's going to change, and most people say, oh, it'll change the timber industry or it'll change the recreational industry. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. But if there's, some weird reason that it hasn't been, shown to be true, to be proven to all of us, it has to deal more with the fact that it would change culture. It would change society. I mean, if there's another human being living on this planet that looks like it's living more primitively than we are, and yet is evading us with all of our science and technology and all of our big brains, then what does that say about us? Are we the top dogs? Are we the chosen? I mean, I'm just waxing philosophical because I really don't know, but I know that the upside of other professionals, for instance, having an encounter like I've had, any of the encounters that I've had, would at least cause them to pause, would at least cause them, whether they wanted to do anything. But here's the thing. How many people do I know that have had an experience like I have, that have been professionals and have simply just like put it away? Like, nope, that never happened to me. Just like, children that were molested or, people that have been raped. To me, there's certain things that we compartmentalize and we want to just forget. I didn't see that. Nope, that didn't happen, because it's easier than having to deal with the cognitive dissonance of that's a reality. Oh my God, this thing is real. These things are out there and they're like us. And yet somehow they're smarter than us because they're more elusive than we are, but yet they're all hairy and they act like animals, And so it causes cognitive dissonance even in myself. Like, how can there be a human type being living around the world that lives more primitively than we do, but yet has the ability to keep themselves away from us, to keep themselves hidden, to not have any one of the three of us have a body in our garage, or have one of them in our garage that we're studying. We can't. Well, I don't say we can't. We seem to have not been able to do this. And because of that reality, that as I see it, there's something about that if we were, if let's say right now I brought one on the show, there would be so much cognitive dissonance and disbelief that even, and I tell my students this all the time, I said, how many of you guys believe in Bigfoot? How many of you guys would believe in Bigfoot if I brought one to class? How many of you, after touching and feeling for the zipper, and if you couldn't find one, would leave class and still think, well, there had to have been a zipper, I just couldn't find it. That's not real. And so this comes back to something else again. And if any of my students are listening, they'll vouch for me on this. I always tell them there's two kinds of people in this world. There are people who will believe it when they see it, and there are people who will see it when they believe it. Think about that for just a second. There are people who will see it when they believe it. I mean, that gets away from science. It's basically, there are science-minded people, and there are those that don't have a science mind. You could show them, you could bring a Bigfoot into their home if you could, and they would still be in denial that no, that's just Doug in a suit. I just can't find the zipper. That's the best suit I've ever seen. And I see the Bigfoot community eat each other alive day after day because, oh, that picture's too blurry. That's a blob squatch. Oh, that picture's way too good. It's fake. You did that digitally. You can't win as a person that's out there really trying to show people what you're seeing. Now, that's not to say that some of those people aren't right. That's people are just putting up, hokum. Because there's always going to be a person that's out there that just likes to get some attention. But there are honest people all over the planet that are seeing something.
I'm Alex Honnold, and while I'm usually outside rock climbing, I'm also the host of a new podcast from Rolex and the Washington Post Creative Group called Planet Visionaries. On the 4th episode, out now, I speak with Kirsten Forsberg about protecting an incredible marine creature, the giant manta ray. Check it out.
Flu season is here. Get your flu shot now at your Hy-Vee pharmacy. It's easy, convenient, and no appointment or prescription is necessary. That's right, there's no appointment necessary, and you don't need a prescription. Plus, when you get your flu shot at Hy-Vee, you get a 20-cent Hy-Vee fuel saver. This year, it's more important than ever to stay healthy. So visit your Hy-Vee pharmacy today and get your flu shot with no appointment necessary and a 20-cent Hy-Vee fuel saver. Some restrictions may apply.
Hearing something, smelling something, having things thrown through their windows, having their houses smacked, things that are leaving waxy residues, Doug, on windows.
Yep.
And those waxes aren't human. Humans don't produce those. Apes don't produce those waxes. And again, I think that people don't know all. I think that just quick rewind, what would I tell if a professional was honestly willing to listen to me, a professional scientist? I would say, have you seen this evidence? And show them whatever evidence they haven't looked at. I wouldn't tell them go research it yourself. I would say, here, what is it that you would like other than a body? I don't have a body for you, but here's the body of evidence. That's all evidence that would get somebody put to jail, convicted of a crime easily, 10 times over, 100 times over.
Yeah. Is there any medical upside, do you think, to finding a Bigfoot or finding a body? Do you think medical upsides, like antibodies they may have that are pure because they haven't been maybe exposed to the diseases, and could there be upsides?
Just like anything else, absolutely. I mean, if it's a species that's like us, I mean, look at the things we do with pigs. Just because they're mammals and they're close to us, we can use a lot of their tissues and things in our bodies. Now, I'm not saying we want to discover Bigfoot so we can use them for their tissues, but there will be things about them based on the genetics that I've seen. If the genetic testing that I've seen is from the Sasquatch beings, then these things either are testing as human because the markers are so much like human markers, or there's some relationship to pan-troglodytes because, for instance, on Expedition Bigfoot, this most recent season, that's what their tests were showing from the environmental DNA, that there was a bunch of chimpanzees running around in the Pacific Northwest.
As did mine from Ontario. Same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So
when you do genetic tests and there aren't, troops of, chimpanzees running around, and that the hair sample or whatever the sample is you've gotten has been properly collected, properly, chain of possessed all the way to the lab, then it's not human contamination. That we need to run these DNA. We need to run this DNA, and we need to run every nucleotide. You can't go with markers because there's human error and there's presumption, and there's presumption in the parsimony. I'm not going to get into all the genetics of it right now because I don't want to bore the audience. But the point is, the genetics tell us that the genetics alone are a mountain of evidence that there is a being, a species, or populations, subspecies. We don't even know. And it's what we don't know that keeps me fascinated and keeps me wanting to learn more.
Do you guys think that maybe possibly the reason why we're missing it is because, like you just brought that up, maybe it's so close to humanoid, like us, that we're looking at going, oh, that's human, we got to toss that out. When we're looking for something that's so different when we should have been looking for something that's the same.
Well, and Doug, I know you know this. What's the percentage of similarity between our DNA and the bonobos, pan-paniscus, pan-troglodytes?
Between 95 and 99%.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely less than 5%, and with the bonobos, I think it's less than 2% difference.
Yeah.
And you can see the difference in the outward appearance of those two species, us and in these pygmy chimps. But yet our DNA is so close that if you were to check the wrong markers, if you didn't look for the correct markers that were different between us, if you didn't know what to look for, then anytime you tested a chimp, you might say, oh, this is a human. Again, we got another human over here.
Yeah.
No, we know what to look for because we know where that difference in the DNA is. With the Sasquatch, we don't know where that difference is. And we have every reason to believe that it's even less of a percentage different than our own. However, what strikes me is, again, that the markers that they're using, again, and it's these choices that scientists make that wherein I think a lot of the some of the problems could lie, because it's based on the paradigm that, this has to be a known. Well, no. What do you use to look for an unknown? Well, at some point, somebody out there, and I'm hoping it's going to be you, Doug, or somebody that's associated with your program, with your next project. Sorry, not your program, your next project, is going to be able to raise enough money to do the full nucleotide sequence on a known sample from a known individual. Now, I know that nobody that I'm aware of has video of them walking up to one saying, hey, Mr. or Miss Bigfoot, I'm going to pluck this hair out of your body real quick. I'm going to draw some blood from you. I'm going to take it over here and run some tests. But there's got to be a point of reasonable, where we take the scientists or the citizen scientists for their word. They had a video of them with gloves on, with a mask on, collecting the sample and transferring it directly to the lab and having it tested. We've got to accept at some point, and that's where, again, the scientific community, especially if you looked at the breakdown of kind of some of the things that happened with Dr. Melba Ketchum's work, there were layers of issues that the scientific community had with her genetic testing on the 117 or whatever it was samples. But all you need is one of those samples to have been done correctly.
Right.
And when I say done correctly, again, her goal in that project was not to do a full nucleotide sequence. They were, again, trying to compare markers. Well, because of that, we've got the story, the news is, well, the mitochondrial DNA says that there was a humanoid, it was interbreeding with female humans 1,500 years ago or something like this. Well, who knows if that's accurate or not, because, again, we haven't run the sequence of what we would believe is a Bigfoot. And I would hope that we can get to a point where one of these samples, somebody could spend the $300,000 or $500,000 that it's going to cost to do a full sequence, so that we can then absolutely know, oh, look at this section of DNA on this particular gene. That's way different than ours.
Don't you agree? I mean, it is about time we get a baseline.
We have to have a baseline, because we're not going anywhere. We haven't gone anywhere. We've had DNA since I was with Dr. Krantz. And even before that, they were publishing. I remember papers being published in the International Society of Cryptozoology, the books and the volumes that would come out for that, of Chinese and American scientists, looking at the hairs with the technology at that time. We've got such better technology and such better ways now. And yet here we are still talking about having to bring in a body. I mean, why?
I think the baseline's coming. I really do. One of the things is to have enough samples to test. And thanks to itching, just getting itchy, and going to a power line pole in a Bigfoot area where they've been seen numerous times. Oh, there's a clump of hair. Oh, we can go back every week and get another clump of hair. I mean, a clump, hundreds of hairs.
Yep.
Not one or two, but hundreds.
Well,
so we're really excited.
And again, we've got PCR. We've got ways to take a sample and make multiple copies of it, thousands in minutes.
Yeah.
And why are we? Why isn't someone like you or I, and or others, with the help of other scientists, that, again, that's their thing, like people that work in these labs? Why aren't we trying to do that as a part of what they do? Again, they're running tests for COVID and everything else. But couldn't they squeeze just a little bit of time or a little bit of money into a budget that would go towards this?
Well, the thing is, we talk about medical upsides. For instance, their blood plasma could hold the cure for COVID.
Could.
The treatment for COVID.
Could very well could. I mean, especially if they're not getting infected,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was interesting. I remember listening to a podcast once with a Native American from the First Nations, telling the folklore about when the first, when the Europeans came and the smallpox spread everywhere, and they covered the aspect of, well, what happened to the Bigfoot tribes? And to some of them, the story and this is the anthropologist in me talking, because again, I'm just talking about folklore now, but for some of those groups, it happened when the smallpox came. Some said, well, the Bigfoot stopped trading with us. Like at that time, they were trading partners, or they actually had relationships with the tribes of Bigfoot, so to speak. But then the smallpox, other people have said that the smallpox actually did infect them and wipe them out. So that would be the downside, is that if they're infected and affected in the same ways that we are by these viruses, then that wouldn't be a benefit. But it would be a benefit to know, again, to have that other blood serum or those surface proteins to look at, to compare not just the proteomics, but the genomics, to see what's the difference between us and them. And if there's not, how are they, especially if we have the same thing, but we're getting sick and they're not. What are they doing? I mean, I'm not going to get all political with masks and social distancing, but the point is,
but
if it gets into their community, it's going to go spread in their community just like it would in ours. So I'm wondering, and so that fascinated me, is that there was folklore related to smallpox. So just to tie to your suggestion there, that there are medical gains that could be, medical advantages to, to the reality of these beings.
Yeah.
That we could stand to gain.
Could save humanity. We don't know it.
Mm-hmm.
You would
Well,
think
we don't know. Yeah.
Incentive right there to apply for a grant. For all I know, they'd get it for $1 million, $10 million to fund research.
Yeah, because we don't know how for instance, we don't know how their body reacts to cancer. No. We don't know how things like that. I mean, the illnesses that take us down.
Yeah, we don't
like
even know
said,
if any
maybe
of them get cancer or die from cancer. We
exactly.
Don't know. We don't know
they
that.
might have that. They might have inside of them the things to unlock cures for our diseases. You guys brought that up. I mean, that's fascinating. I never thought about that angle.
And I couldn't even tell you what they're. I mean, again, I know there are people listening or that will listen to this that have done their own investigations and research and have their sites. I'm thinking specifically right now of the Pacific Northwest. They're the guys up there that have been working for years with the nests and things, and
the Olympic Project.
And they've got their own insights, and one of the biggest things I think that would benefit is everybody kind of sharing. Like we all just shared what we know. The more you know, I tell my kids all the time, the more you know. And I said, I'm the teacher, but I don't know everything. I said, you guys teach me stuff most days, and that's what I think is incredible is that we get to a point where those of us that, learned from teachers, became professional scientists or doctors or geneticists, close our minds. That's not being a skeptic. That's something else. And I really wish that more of the professional scientists and people that have that kind of training would take this seriously, would apply for those grants. And I wish that the bean counters that decide on who gets the grants would not just laugh and scoff because others have made a joke out of the topic. I mean, Bigfoot's become Americana in my lifetime. When I was a kid, it wasn't that way, but Bigfoot's used to sell pizzas and beef jerky, and heck, sure. I've got a bar of soap in my bathroom that supposedly is squatchy somehow.
Yeah, it's almost America's mascot at this point.
Yeah, and and I hate to think that means that it's this big joke, and that in some way by buying a bar of soap or any of those products, I used to show my students Harry and the Hendersons because I thought it was a fun way to wrap the year up and a foot in the door to tell them my stories, because a lot of my kids, especially my first years of teaching, I was really standoffish about sharing my personal life with them. I would tell them certain stories that were safe stories, but come the end of the year, when you've had a whole year with students, you get closer to them and you kind of want to be able to let them in a little bit. Now, the most recent school that I taught at, that was different. Which was nice. Actually, I got to really fully experience just being myself day after day. And I remember a class of kids that would literally do whatever work I asked them to do just for 5 minutes of story time at the end of class. And so, and that's fun and fine, but I don't want to derail the point. But the point I was trying to make is that scientists and professionals need to take this more seriously. And if they're not taking it more seriously, I question whether or not they're really true scientists. I really, and I'm sorry that want to be mad at me, but I'm sorry, but it's one of those sorry, not sorries. I'm not sorry that you're so much of a skeptic that you forgot how to be a scientist. A scientist has to have two things, not just a healthy skepticism, but you have to have an open mind. You've got to have an open mind. You've got to have an open mind to look at the evidence, not to listen to every story that you hear, but to look at the evidence. Where there's physical evidence, where there's smoke, there's a fire. You've got to look at it. And I really hope that any scientists out there that aren't doing that will take some time to reflect and hopefully help me and help others push this topic forward, because they're there, they're here, they've been here. And the more we can learn about them, the more benefits we can gain. Though, again, I really feel like it will change society. I mean, it could change people's religious beliefs. It could change if there's a bunch of people that aren't paying taxes living in the woods right now, it's going to change economics. It's going to change politics. A lot of things will change with the proof, the absolute, undeniable proof of this species' coexistence with us.
Do you think humans could live like a Bigfoot, Carlos?
I do, but I don't think that most of the humans that I know could. I will speak for myself in this case that, there was a time where, I was in the jungle of Africa in the Congo and I ate caterpillars and I ate termites and I ate like hunters and gatherers were eating. Now, my body couldn't handle it, either because it was my body, maybe it was because of the local flora and fauna and the individuals that were living there, they were already accustomed to that biome and their gut biome, and my gut wasn't. I don't know. That's a whole other study that would need to be done. But I think that most people could, having watched shows like Fear Factor, where I see people eat and do things. I know that we're all capable of living more primitively. And, there was a whole movement when I was in college of modern primitives that's kind of continued to this day of, people doing the tattooings and the piercings. But there's also, survivalists, people that are out there living. And sadly, I hate to say it, there's a lot of urban survivalists. I see a lot of homeless folk that, they find a way to eat and survive every day in ways that most of us don't. And a lot of those ways are, dehumanizing and I feel for those people when I see them because, you don't know anybody else's story. But I'm sure. diving. I'm probably going too deep of a dive on your question. But
well, but we don't
believe, yes, people could.
Human beings they have to be willing to step out of their comfort zone. That's what it is we become comfortable too with our modern society, stuff like that. I mean, it wasn't always this way.
No.
We were living very primitive. It wasn't that long ago.
Now is the best time to start working at Amazon. They are offering sign-on bonuses up to $3,000 and hourly pay up to $22 per hour. You'll bring home a great weekly paycheck, and many jobs come with benefits that start on your first day. That's higher pay, sign-on bonuses, benefits day one. And you'll be part of a safe and inclusive workplace ranked among the best in the world. Go to amazon.com/apply to start your job search today. Amazon is proud to be an equal opportunity employer.
Quick Trip and Pepsi are teaming up with your Northland Ford dealers to award a new Ford Bronco Sport to one lucky Vikings fan in the opening drive sweepstakes. Ford's on-road manners, off-road ability, and slick interior designs will impress. So to enter, stop by your local Quick Trip, buy any 20-ounce Pepsi-branded product or pothole frozen pizza with your rewards card, and you're entered. Boom! If picked, you'll win $25 for every yard earned on the Vikings opening drive, and a chance to win a Ford Bronco Sport. No purchase necessary. Quick Trip. See you next time. Maybe in a Bronco Sport.
Really, in the grand scheme of things, it was not that long ago. Mankind was living very primitive.
Well, and again, there still are current hunter and gatherer societies of human beings around the planet. They're dwindling in number. They're more influenced culturally and just through diffusion and everything else from the rest of us. Living around them. Even that village that I lived in back in the 90s. There were villagers there wearing Mickey Mouse shirts and Michael Jackson and the Chicago Bulls stuff. And I was in the rainforest in the middle of Africa, and so I know that especially American influence is out there. Whatever that, I use the words American influence. I don't know if that's capitalism or truly American, but I've seen our cultural items in places where I, couldn't find certainly wasn't finding, hamburgers and French fries. We were eating what was in the environment, but there were outside influences. And so I know that if they can find those outside influences and still live their own lives hunting and gathering, that we could, but I know we would have a heck of a hard time doing that.
Do you find it really interesting, Carlos, that there are like zero reports of tool use in a Bigfoot? It's like zero.
Mm-hmm. Well,
we have reports of orangutans.
Yeah.
We do a Bigfoot's using tools.
And I see that through two lenses. I mean, I see that through either they simply don't. They don't know how to, or they're not capable of. That's one way to look at it. Or again, I've really started to look through the second lens of how could something that's so much like us, that seems so primitive, have done this, unless they're pulling the wool over our eyes, and maybe they're the more advanced species.
Sure.
And we're the ones who think we're so all that in a bag of chips, but they're really the ones that are laying back, to coin a phrase, laying back in the cut, while, while we were going about, the rat race of the lives that we were choosing, they've just been there for hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years. Again, we don't know the timeline.
Yeah. For all we know, they have made a conscious decision.
Mm-hmm.
The tool is against their law.
Yep. Or again, that if they're going to use a tool, that they do something with it to make it not be found. But again, to me, I just don't think that they used. I think that they use the simplest tools possible that don't look like tools, and I think that they know again what we know, and so they don't want to leave any signs behind of anything that would indicate. I apologize, somebody's at my door, but that would indicate their presence. Again, I mean, I know I've heard this going back to the 80s, or at least back to the time when I was with Dr. Krantz. There are people who believe that they hide their tracks. I mean, the one guy that's one of the four horsemen that's still left alive right now is Peter Byrne, correct? I think he's still going. And Peter Byrne was always a proponent. Of benign research, first of all, but number two, he believed that they hid their tracks. He firmly went on record as saying that, and he was a big game hunter. I mean, this is a guy, again, I take what he had to say as credible as anyone else, in terms of, I give him credence. I give him respect for the work that he did in the field. He's now in his 90s, I believe.
Yeah, Peter was an amazing ambassador for the topic.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But ultimately, I've never seen one hide its tracks. I've never seen one make a tool. I've never seen one hide a tool. But I have seen, much like other primates, use things. I mean, people have seen them carrying things. People have seen them wearing clothes. People's clothes that they take off a clothesline. I know I heard a story of one like eating. Somebody like wrapped up their picnic table, the cloth and everything with all the clippings and the peelings of what they'd done, and threw it in the trash. And one had like plopped that in its mouth, which again doesn't make me think that they're the brightest things. So there's things that they do that make me think that they're not super intelligent. But then again, maybe they're doing that intentionally. Maybe they're doing that because they know somebody's watching, so that person then thinks that they're stupid. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying not to. It might sound like I'm overthinking it, but at this stage, I've got to be, again, a good scientist has to be open to all possibilities and look at all the, if you're going to ask a question, then be ready to ask yourself that question and look at all of the possibilities, not just the one that you think it could be or want it to be. Open yourself up to all of it.
So, what you're saying, Carlos, is they won't sharpen a stick, but they may use a stick, but they're not going to sharpen it.
They may find a stick that's already sharp, or they might
natural.
Yeah. On one hand, we're talking about maybe possibly that they're very primitive. But on the other hand, man, they show high intelligence, like the ability to evade any kind of photographic technology. I mean, it's like they possess the sixth sense to not be captured in any legitimate way. I mean, like clear way. I mean, isn't that amazing? I mean, that's just amazing to me.
I saw 3 things on our camera system that couldn't have been anything else.
True. That's true. But what I'm saying is,
we weren't set up yet, and we weren't recording to the cloud yet. So I see this, and they couldn't have been anything else. They were walking, 3 of them walking in line, that tall. But on the same token, there could be visual acuities that they have, super abilities, seeing in UV. There could be other things. We just don't know.
But it also speaks, Doug, to some understanding of technology.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, some intelligence of technology and some awareness of technology at the same time.
And I would definitely say that, they absolutely know what a gun is when they see one, a rifle.
Perfect segue. Tell us about the story.
Oh, all right. Well, so my friend Kirk Stewart, who I've now known for a couple of years, met him through his sister, who's good friends with my girlfriend, Renee. And come to find out, he's been living off the grid, organic farming for the last 20 years up here in Northern California. And some time ago, he'd been up in the mountains, and he'd left a cache, of food and kind of a little encampment area for when he would come back to go hunting. And instead of humping everything back in, it was so remote that he simply set things up and he had left this gun in the nook of a tree, leaning up against the tree. When he came back, all the food was there. Everything that he left in the cache was still there. So if you're thinking bear or something, there's not evidence of this. The gun was gone. So I'm thinking, your first thought, well, some human came by and said, oh, hey, free gun. But he looked around and looked around and looked around. Some 20 or so yards away from the tree, he finds the gun buried under, detritus. It had been moved. Now, the gun had no signs of claw marks, no signs of teeth marks, again, that you would expect if a bear or, a larger animal were to have picked it up and moved it. This doesn't preclude the possibility that some human found it and was like, ooh, a gun. I'm going to move it over here and bury it in some topsoil. I'm not saying that that's not a possibility. I'm saying that it's so unlikely, especially without giving away too much from the documentary that's what we're going to be working on and going back to that location to try to recreate. But something took the gun and buried it. And it was where this
comical.
And where this happened, but it didn't take any of the food, and it didn't take any of the other stuff that was left there.
Yeah.
And the weird piece is where this happened. Kirk and two other friends in this very, not going to say the exact same area, but in a very close area, not far from there, they saw two of them playing in a lake, splashing water up in the air, these two creatures. Mm-hmm. And then when the two creatures became aware of them, they went tearing through the woods like a DC-9, making all kinds of noise. That night in their hunting camp, they got yelled at and screamed at and howled at from both ridge lines. That night, at one point, he was the two other guys he was with were in their tents. He was not. He was on the ground sleeping with his dog. And this thing came screaming and running out of the woods and ran right over the top of him. Boom, 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 right over his body. I mean, I've never had an encounter like that, but I mean, again, it sounds like they weren't happy that they were there. They're trying to get him to leave. The screaming didn't work. The smashing and snapping of branches didn't work. I mean, these three guys were undeterred, and then this thing ran through their camp. And all that happened in the same locale where the gun was removed and buried. So I'm looking forward to going back up there. We're going to be filming a documentary up there. If any of the viewers or listeners rather go to Indiegogo.com, you can find it under Bigfoot Buried My Gun! ! And and my brand is the Chronicles of Carlos, so chroniclesofcarlos.com. But the documentary is on Indiegogo, and it's the name of the documentary is going to be The Chronicles of Carlos, and the first volume is going to be Bigfoot Buried My Gun! ! So
that's cool.
I hope that's okay that I throw that little plug in.
No, absolutely. Again, if you want to donate.
Carlos. Yes, please. And there's perks, all kinds of fun perks. Is it okay if I say a couple of perks real quick?
Yes, please.
I mean, everything from, just a thank you, shout out on social media up to and including, the producer level, come in and get some of those casts. You can get the Patterson Gimlin cast. And if we collect anything on the expedition itself, if we get audio, if we get video, if we get hair or footprints, then certain donors will actually be able to get copies of that. If we get enough hair, I'm willing, and I've put into the perks that you can get some of that actual hair, because cool. You don't, nowadays you don't need all of it. If there's a big clump, if we find a big, a large amount of hair, then we can divvy that out. So, anyways, and then just regular merch, from my brand, the T-shirts and whatnot. So, anyways,
very cool.
Yeah.
Indiegogo, everybody, check it out. Project, it's called Chronicles of Carlos. And let me move this thing out of the way. Bigfoot Buried My Gun is what it's called. Check that out, and you can donate to it. I know it's a fairly small budget year after. It's less than $10,000 according to this. So I think we can make this happen, and we can see this thing become a reality. And if you give enough, you can get all those perks. So if you got a few extra bucks laying around and you want to see this thing come to fruition where he makes this, definitely think about donating.
Appreciate that, Joel. And the biggest thing that we're going to spend money on is getting the director up here to film it. And there's one particular kind of camera that I wanted, and that's a thermal camera. So that's probably the big ticket item in terms of the fundraising. But once we have that camera, we'll have it for future use. And I'm hoping that Doug and I will be able to utilize that camera in a future joint venture.
And Carlos, I just want to say you are a godsend to the mystery.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And it's really, it's exciting to be back involved, and yet it's kind of, I'm a bit trepidatious. I got some fear.
Sure.
I've just started back into teaching in our new community up here, but I've just gotten to that point where I'm ready to be in the field as much as possible. And and I'm excited. I'm just excited for that opportunity, and I'm just hoping I can make everything, work.
Yeah, I think you will. Carlos Jiménez, everybody. I didn't even stumble that second time. Great having you on. We learned a lot from you. Look forward to talking to you again. Love to have you back on in the near future. So, guys, check it out again. I want you guys all to run on over to that Indiegogo page. Give a few bucks if you can. And Carlos, what's the best way to get a hold of you? Should somebody want to reach out to you?
To reach out to me, the best way would be through the website, the Chronicles of Carlos.com. There's a newsletter, email format there, or on social media. I'm usually the fastest getting back to people on like Messenger or Facebook, and social media, but my website and social media would be great.
Very, very cool. Man, again, thank you so much, Carlos, for coming on. Until next time, guys, this is Joel over here, Studio A, Studio B, Doug over there. We're signing off. But take care of each other, love each other, and keep looking for Bigfoot, because the mystery is not solved quite yet.
Thank you, guys.
It's been a long day. Your schedule's tight. Can we just take care of dinner for you? Quick Trip has take-home meals. Not cheap flash frozen stuff. Made from scratch, fresh, never frozen. Great quality because we make it ourselves. Grab a meal now to heat and eat later. Great kitchen cravings meals like fettuccine alfredo with grilled chicken, meatloaf with mashed potatoes and gravy, roast turkey with dressing and mashed potatoes. I feel a meal, a great family meal coming on that you didn't even have to cook. Quick Trip, we got you covered.
Our warehouses are team settings. Everyone truly has each other's backs. Together, we're serving customers and playing an important part in the economy and communities. Together, we're building great careers and lives. Just ask the many UPS executives who started right here in our warehouses. UPS is hiring warehouse workers near you, starting at $22 per hour. Shift your team, shift your pay, shift your life. Apply at upsjobs.com/shift. Make the shift, make a difference.